Welcome to the deep dive. It feels like we're just constantly swimming in health advice, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. One minute something's a miracle food, the next it's supposedly terrible for you.
Exactly. It's so overwhelming trying to figure out what actually works, what's genuinely going to help you feel good, especially when, some foods we think are healthy might be sneakily causing problems.
Mm.
So today, we want to cut through that noise. We're doing a deep dive into some specific foods, ones that could be surprisingly tough on your gut health, maybe causing inflammation without you realizing it.
Right. And the goal here isn't just to list foods, it's about understanding why. We're going to get into anti-nutrients and specifically lectins.
Lectins, okay.
Yeah, drawing from some really solid sources you shared. We want to give you actionable insights, not just another list of don't eats. It's about knowledge, so you can make choices that actually work for your body. Think of it as becoming your own health detective.
I like that health detective. That really fits the N of one idea we talk about. Okay, so let's start unpacking this. We hear a lot about antioxidants, right? The good
Yeah.
guys cleaning up toxins.
Clean up, true, yeah.
But what about the flip side? You mentioned anti-nutrients. What exactly are those?
Well, just like the name sounds, they kind of do the opposite of antioxidants. Instead of helping, they can actually deplete your body of essential vitamins and minerals.
Deplete. So they take things away.
Yeah, like silent robbers almost. Stealing nutrients your body needs before you can even use them.
Wow. Okay, and where do we find these? Are they in obscure things?
That's the kicker. Some of the worst offenders are staples in the, standard Western diet. Things people eat every single day without thinking twice.
Right, so it's not just about calories then, it's about what these foods are doing inside us.
Exactly. It's part of why that modern diet can leave us feeling, well, depleted, even if we're technically eating enough.
Okay, so based on the research, what are the main culprits, the big categories of these anti-nutrients?
The sources point pretty clearly to number one being things like refined flours, refined sugars, and those highly processed bad oils, the vegetable oils.
The usual suspects, kind of.
Pretty much. They taste good, give you that quick hit, but over time they're actively stripping away B vitamins, magnesium, things you really need for energy, for muscles.
So it leads to longer-term problems, even if it's subtle at first.
Yeah, definitely. A whole range of issues can build up.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's shift to something maybe more surprising, lectins. You mentioned them. They're in foods we often think are healthy, right?
That's right. Lectins are another type of anti-nutrient, and they're fascinating. They're basically a plant's natural defense mechanism.
Defense, like against being eaten.
Exactly. It's how plants protect themselves from predators, insects, animals, even us. It's their way of saying, hey, maybe find something else for dinner.
That's actually pretty clever of the plants, but not so great for us when we eat them. How do they affect us?
Well, when we eat high lectin foods, these compounds can bind to the lining of our gut.
Bind to it.
Yeah, and potentially cause damage, interfere with nutrient absorption, kind of pulling those vitamins and minerals out. Plus, they can disrupt our gut microbiome, that whole ecosystem of bacteria we need.
Okay, so they mess with digestion and nutrient uptake.
Pretty much. Brilliant for the plant's survival, but a challenge for our gut health.
Now, here's something important the sources stressed. Is it true that lectins affect everyone, not just people with obvious digestive problems?
That's a really key point. The research strongly suggests, yes, they affect everyone to some degree. It's just that some people feel it much more acutely.
So it's not just for people with IBS or SIBO or something?
No. Think of it like this. Your body has to work harder. Now, if you already have gut inflammation, bloating, chronic digestive stuff, stomach pain,
Yeah.
then lectins are particularly tough.
Right, it adds fuel to the fire.
Exactly. It's a bit like the whole gluten thing years ago. People initially dismissed it, but then so many found relief by cutting back. If your gut's unhappy, reducing lectins is definitely something to experiment with.
And what about autoimmune conditions?
Yeah.
The sources really linked lectins to those.
Absolutely. Things like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Hashimoto's, they often have roots in gut health. So addressing the gut is critical.
And lectins play a big role there.
A very significant one, according to the research. A 2015 study specifically found lectins can really exacerbate things for autoimmune patients. It said, and this is a direct quote, because of their binding properties, lectins can cause nutrient deficiencies, they can disrupt digestion, and they can cause severe intestinal damage.
Wow, severe intestinal damage. That's That's intense.
It really highlights the potential impact, especially if your system is already compromised.
So connecting this back to what you said about nutrient depletion, does this mean lectins could make fasting harder for some people?
That's a really practical angle. Yes, potentially. If you're eating a lot of lectin-rich foods, you might already be a bit low on certain minerals because you're not absorbing them well. Then, when you fast, that underlying deficiency becomes more obvious. People feel horrible, really low energy. Sometimes it's not just the fasting, it's that lack of nutrients being amplified.
So maybe taking some minerals or electrolytes could help if you fast and eat higher lectin foods.
It's definitely something to consider. It could help bridge that gap, especially if you suspect lectins might be hindering your absorption.
This is really helpful context. It's not just avoid this, but understand how it works. Okay, so the good news, can we do anything about the lectins in foods? Are there ways to reduce them?
Yes, absolutely. And it's often quite simple. The sources highlight water-based cooking, boiling, basically.
Boiling, that's it.
Yeah, boiling can apparently destroy up to 95% of the lectins in many foods. It makes them much easier on the gut.
That's fantastic news. Just using water can disarm them. What about other methods?
Soaking is another really effective one, especially for things like nuts and legumes. Think almonds.
Right, people soak almonds.
Exactly. Research suggests soaking for, say, 5 hours or more can also remove about 95% of lectins. So how you prepare the food makes a huge difference.
Preparation is key. Okay, this leads us nicely into the list. The sources identified 7 foods particularly high in lectins. Let's go through them.
Sounds good. But remember, context matters. And that N of 1 idea, how your body reacts.
Right, not a hit list, more like an awareness list.
Yeah.
Okay, food number 1.
Wheat. This one's tricky because finding good quality wheat is tough now. Most of it is highly processed.
So what's the recommendation?
Look for ancient grains, things that are sprouted, less processed, and definitely go organic. You want to avoid those pesticides, which can act as endocrine disruptors messing with your hormones.
Good point. Okay, number 2.
Raw or roasted peanuts.
Ah, peanuts. I admit I like them sometimes, ball game nostalgia.
Totally get that. But generally, the sources put them pretty high on the lectin scale, even raw. So maybe enjoy them occasionally, but probably not a daily healthy snack.
Got it. Number 3.
Soybeans. Now, soy gets a complicated rap, doesn't it?
It really does. Good, bad.
Well, a lot of the negative stuff came from the processed, GMO, pesticide-heavy soy. But interestingly, insights from a functional OB suggest organic, non-GMO soy can actually be beneficial, especially for estrogen levels during menopause.
Oh, interesting.
However, if you have gut issues, even with the good stuff, soaking and water-based cooking are still highly recommended to cut down those lectins.
Nuance again. Okay, number 4.
Tomatoes, part of the nightshade family.
Right, you hear about nightshades and arthritis sometimes.
Exactly. So if you have autoimmune issues or gut problems, the advice is often to try removing them temporarily. See how you feel, then reintroduce and test your reaction.
That personal experiment approach.
Yep, your N of 1.
Number 5.
Potatoes, another nightshade.
But wait, didn't you say boiling helps?
I did, and that's the good news with potatoes. Boiling them destroys most of the lectins, making them a much better option if prepared that way.
Okay, good to know. Number 6.
Eggplants, also a nightshade?
So, similar advice to tomatoes.
Pretty much. Moderation is probably wise, and if you have autoimmune conditions, maybe try that temporary removal test to see if it impacts your symptoms.
Makes sense. And the final one, number 7.
Red kidney beans.
Okay, beans are known for lectins. What's the key here?
Avoid the canned ones if you can. The strong recommendation is to buy them dry and boil them from scratch. That water-based cooking really knocks out the lectin issue.
So cooking from scratch is the way to go for kidney beans.
Definitely.
This whole discussion really brings us back to that N of 1 philosophy, doesn't it? We want these easy, good food, bad food lists.
We really do. But it's rarely that simple. The sources were clear. The main thing to consistently avoid is that ultra-processed Western diet stuff, refined flours, sugars, bad oils.
That's the real absolute maybe.
Yeah. Beyond that, it's about figuring out what works for your unique system.
Because we're all different.
Exactly. Your biology, your gut bugs, your sensitivities, they're unique. You are your own experiment. That's the N of 1. Listening to your body is the most powerful tool you have.
So how can people practically apply this? Give us some scenarios.
Okay, so if you have an autoimmune condition, maybe you try boiling these lectin foods or cut them out for a bit, then add one back slowly, see if symptoms flare, direct feedback.
Test and observe.
Right. Or Say you don't have autoimmunity, but you feel lousy when you fast. Ask yourself, could high lectin intake be playing a role in nutrient levels? Maybe try preparing them differently or adding some minerals and see if fasting feels better.
Interesting connection.
And if you're generally healthy, just practice moderation. Don't eat these high lectin foods every single day, especially unprepared. Mix it up, pay attention.
It really comes down to awareness and understanding your own body's signals. Food is medicine, but the prescription is personal.
Beautifully put. And remembering that you likely have way more answers for your own health than you've probably been led to believe.
Okay, so wrapping up, the big takeaway is understanding anti-nutrients, those refined carbs, sugars, oils, and then understanding lectins, knowing the top sources like wheat, peanuts, soy, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, kidney beans.
And knowing how to prepare them or test your own reaction.
Right. Applying that N of one principle, become your own health detective. It's empowering.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Given how differently foods affect each of us, what's one small dietary experiment you could try this week? Just one thing to learn more about how your body works.
Love that. A call to personal action. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 7 foods that might be causing inflammation and gut issues, even the ones that seem healthy. Keep returning for more healthy inspiration.